not addressed here, you can follow up in those sessions, but I'll try to cover an overview before we talk about the specific career paths, right? So yeah, before we start, just a quick introduction so you guys have a little bit of context, right, where I'm coming from. So my name is Abhishek. I graduated from Bitsvilani, and right now I'm a senior product manager for Booking.com. I'm based in Netherlands. That's where we are headquartered. Um, Quick glance. So I come from a non-coding background. So I didn't study computer science in college, and I graduated in 2012. My first product, like proper product management role, was in 2015 in Bangalore. So I joined as an associate PM. That's one of the entry roles in this area. So in those 3 years, I've done multiple roles. And at the time, there was no, at least in India, there was no structured product management courses or product management learning pathways. So it was mostly learning on the jobs. So a year before I joined as an APM, I was trying to learn the craft on my own. So through online resources, through talking to people, and then eventually I landed up in this role. Um, my first product was digital payments for medical appointments. So I used to work for Procto, which is Bangalore-based healthcare company. It was the largest funded healthcare startup at the time. So it was a really growth stage. And so if you guys know, it's basically the portal allows you to book appointments with doctors online. But most of those transactions used to happen in cash when people used to book appointments, but they used to go to the clinics and then make the payments in cash. So my job was to enable digital payments, right? So, and if you think it from the product perspective, if you enable payments, then the startup or the company or the product has a better hook with the consumers. So it was an interesting starting role for me. Learned a lot and stayed in fintech for a little bit. So primarily, I operate in consumer internet space, which is basically a very umbrella term of any digital product where you are delivering the service directly to the consumer using internet, right, online. So e-commerce is a classic example. All e-commerce companies fall into this space. It can all the digital products in finance and so on. So primarily this space. So just a caveat, even the following slides would focus on my experience in this space, right? Because product management expands beyond e-commerce, beyond consumer internet, right? So you have companies like hardware companies like Lenovo, where you still have product management roles. You have companies like Tesla, for example, you still have product managers there, but the nature of role will be a little different. So I'll limit my discussion to consumer internet space. Yeah, so today I will cover a little bit about what product management is, high level overviews, talk a little bit about career paths, and then take your questions. So I guess before we jump in, just put things into perspective, right? So since you guys are starting or probably considering a role in this, it's important to understand where it's coming from, right? So product management, as many people believe, is not a new role. It has been around for quite some time. So product management as a role existed for several decades, right? And it's useful to know how the role is evolving because it's a very dynamic role or industry where your nature of work evolves every few years, in my experience. So just a bit of high level history, right? So in the early stage, probably in 30s and 40s, so big companies like HP, General Electrics, Procter and Gamble used to have product managers, but their role was primarily focused on managing the brand because these were already established companies, but they needed somebody to specifically focus on how the brand is perceived in the market and also manage the profit and loss of specific categories. So they were not really involved in active development, but more about how the market is behaving, how the consumers are using the product, basically, right? So that's the early stage of product management. Then came the software era. I guess you guys probably seen. No points in guessing who these gentlemen are. So they're probably one of those most successful product managers of all time who led Microsoft and Apple. So in this phase of uh, product management evolution, the focus became around launching new products. So let's say you have a product like Apple, but you want to cater to new segments. Let's say, or you want to build a new feature around it. So that's where product management managers started focusing on this new set of skills, how to launch a new product, and also in the process started managing the entire life cycle. So we'll talk about what that life cycle is in a bit, um, but that's where the ownership of product management really boosted. And then internet age. So this is 90, like 90s and beyond, right? So the big shift that happened here is that you have more data now, right? So because now you have consumer businesses directly online, so you have more usage patterns. So the behavior of the consumer is changing, and that is where, as a product manager, you need more tools and more techniques to deliver products. You cannot just follow the standard template that Microsoft used to have in the early days, right? And this is also the time when in India product management roles started with companies like Infosys and Tata's, right? So around the same time, so Infosys obviously had structured product management roles, um, and this is where the agile techniques also really grew in the industry. So we are still in internet age, so this is still relevant to us, right? So this is it's not like this is outdated. This is still evolving, but you also see a change now, which somebody might call as a future of product management, because now you have machine learning products as well, right? So if you see most of the big consumer products, let's say Netflix or Amazon, are heavily relying on machine learning techniques to optimize their products. So it's an evolving skill set, not that it's something that's happening across the board, but it's still a transition that the industry is facing. So we'll be operating in these two realms, internet age and the future of machine learning and AI tools. Cool. So what does a PM do, right? So I guess it depends on who you're asking. So you'll see different definitions, and there's so much material online that might confuse you at times, and rightly so, because there is no consensus right now in the community on what product management is or what the role is. But at least what we can do, we can try to identify what are the factors or what are the criteria that change the definition of product management, right? So in my view, there are typically three things. One is the nature of role changes with the size of company, which basically means if you're working with a startup versus you're working with a big tech company. Then it can change based on the nature of the product. So let's say if you're working on a B2C product versus a B2B product, um, if you're working, let's say, hardware product versus a software product, if you're working on a product which is entirely digital versus um, semi-digital, let's say, in a way it's delivered offline, and also how the focus of business changes over time. So for the same company and the same product, you might be doing different things in different phase of business. So you might be in a growth phase versus you might be in a more stable, incremental operational um, stage where you're just optimizing for the already established products, like let's say Apple. So, but one probably common denominator that you'll find is that as a product manager, you always need to build product requirements and you need to manage the development lifecycle. So this will not change whatever stage of the product you are, right? So this is the bare minimum skill set or bare minimum job requirement, you can call it, right? Basically, what it means is that you need to identify what need to be built. So you define the requirements around it, and then you translate it to your team of software developers, designers, and take it forward. Basically, you manage the entire process. Some of you might be familiar with the agile way of developing products. So this is the bare minimum, but we'll talk about rough key skills, right? So regardless of the size of the company, you will at least need to focus on these two areas. One is product planning and design. So let's say there is already a business case there. So um, in case of startup, let's say there is somebody who's leading the business, comes up with an idea that we want to launch, let's say, Zomato in a new city, right? Or we want to launch Zomato in a non-urban um, area. So you have that business case. Your role will start from there, where you start analyzing the business case, and then you determine what features to build. So that's where the solutioning PM thinking comes in. Then you identify the technical feasibility of that plan. You come up with a design, the user experience, and then you have a roadmap in place on how this will be rolled out, right? So this is a really complex, it looks like a complex set of steps, but this all is basically how you think about the product, how you think about the business problem, and how do you plan it out. So product planning and design is essential skill across the board wherever you work. Then product delivery and launch. So this is where you work with developers, designer, data scientists. Depending on the nature of the product, you might have different functions, right? So in some cases, you might just have backend developers, no design, right? Let's say if you're building an internal tool or a data product, you need to project manage it. So you need to know how to organize different tasks, different projects together. Then you need uh, a way to be able to test this product. So there is a concept called minimum viable product. You might be aware, but this is basically the minimum set of features that you launch to validate your idea, right? So let's say, again, taking the same example, if you want to launch Zomato in a different city, what are the minimum change required on the existing product that can help you test that idea whether Zomato will work successfully in a new city or not, right? So, and then you go to market. That's where you work with marketers or your launch team. Now, so if the product works, let's say you do all this, right? You have an idea in place, you figure out the features, you work with the team, successfully launch it. What happens next, right? So either it fails or it works, right? So you need to define a success criteria, right? What is the criteria? What is the metric you are tracking to know whether the product works or not? So if the product works, then it follows a process of repeated iteration cycle. What that means is that now you have to improve it. So you have a base product that works. Um, your job will transform into identifying new use cases, and you drive growth. And that's where you also see the companies move from early stage to growth stage, right? So early stage is when they're still validating the product, they're trying to establish a user base. But growth stage is when they're really identifying new segments, new users, new features, right? So for example, 10 minutes delivery for Swiggy, it's a growth feature, right? Because the product works, people are ordering food, but now they're experimenting with these new workflows, new use cases. So your all role evolves. Mm, yeah, so this is basically again, if you join a early stage company or if you join a growth stage company, you call it a scale up, right? Startup or a scale up. But if you join, let's say, a late stage company or a big tech firm or a corporate, then what happens is you're not touching all the areas, right? So uh, you will have specific experts to help you with specific areas. So you will still be doing product planning and product delivery, but there are other aspects of delivering the product where you might have dedicated teams. Uh, and so I'll just talk about these four areas, right? And what happens is, so some of you might be from a tech background, some of you might be not from a tech background. So for depending on how your what your background is and what your focus area is, you can develop expertise in these areas, right, while doing the product planning and delivery. So high level customer insights. So you need to understand who your user is, and you need to basically do some data analysis to study the market, right? So it's not really needed. For example, in the previous example, you might already have a B plan. So somebody might have figured it out already. Who's the customer? Who are we targeting? But if you develop an expertise in this, it's a useful area to grow as a PM. Or even if you start, let's say, if you have a knack for customer insight, data research, market research, it will always help. Then product execution. So you might be really great and at writing requirements. You might be really good at, let's say, working with developers. You might be a developer yourself. So you can build an expertise in product execution while still doing the other stuff, but you will be, let's say, growing more into this particular craft. Product strategy. So some of you might have a knack, let's say, for commercial thing, right? So you probably are good at evaluating business models, right? Like how Swiggy is working, how Zomato is working. So you can use those skill set into your product development craft. So product strategy. So you have a lot of PMs. Um, like after a few years, they would be doing execution, but then they start contributing to the strategy of the business. And then influencing people. This becomes a really critical role. Basically, how you manage people. because you might not be influencing directly, but how do you manage stakeholders? It's an important part of the role. So you see a lot of product managers are really good with this. They might not be really good with tech, but they're good with managing the product with people. So I mean, there's a lot of details, but this is basically high level how uh, what the skills needed and what are the expertise you can go through or you can build over time. So yeah, coming to the probably the main aspect of today's presentation, starting roles. So there are different ways I think you can approach this, and it's evolving over time, and it's also evolving in India as I see. So firstly is associate PM. That's how I started. This is the entry level role. Um, Basically, if you start as a fresh graduate, let's say, as an associate PM, you will be involved in some sort of user study, right? Basically analyzing if there's already a product in market. Let's say you join a company, again Zomato, let's say you have a product in mind. You start analyzing who the user of Zomato is, or how they're using the product. And then you might have ownership of specific features, so small projects, right? So you might not be owning everything, but you own, let's say, a small feature within the entire product subset. And then you work with PMs, you support those PMs. So that's basically associate PM role is basically really focused on how you learn on the job. You might not be delivering a lot, but that's where you need to start learning to establish a career into PM. That's where you assess whether you actually are cut out for this or not. So the way it works is in like at a global stage, you see some of the big companies. So Google actually started this idea of associate program manager, product manager. So they have this program called rotational PM role. It's basically they take potentially young fresher candidates and put them into a 2-year rotational program within the company. So in these 2 years, the associate PMs would interact with multiple teams, multiple product areas to learn the ropes. So now most companies have these rotational programs: Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, even LinkedIn, I guess. And in India also, some companies like Flipkart, they would not have organized RPM roles, but they have started intaking entry level PMs, right? Graduates as PMs. So and again, so Flipkart, Swiggy, Paytm, they will have entry level roles for product managers. um, Basically what they're evaluating, if you basically are interested, they would be evaluating your problem solving skills. Basically, how do you approach a particular problem? Can you really analyze the customer behavior? Can you really analyze the pain point? Business and tech understanding, like we said, right? So um, and team and culture. So these are probably the key skill sets they are looking for an entry level PM. But again, it's not that you have to be really good at all this in order to crack a role. Most of the learning happens on the job early on. So this is probably one of the more organized way of getting into product management if you can crack an APM role or an entry PM role in these companies. But there are some other alternates, right? If because there are not a lot of roles that exist here. So so one of the classic ways you transition from developer to PM. So if somebody is from a software background, you can start as a developer, and within your company you might have opportunities to transition. So that's where, because as a developer you'll be working with a PM, so you start learning the aspects of product management on the job, and then you transition. So that's very common way actually nowadays for people to transition. But at the same time you have other areas. So you see product analyst role. So a product analyst or a business analyst, right? So these roles also have existed for a long time at all stages of companies. So you are primarily involved in data analysis and insights. So you'll be working specifically on some data analytics tool. You might need to learn all those hard skills, right? So let's say SQL, R, and all Python. And then you start shadowing the PMs and eventually transition. So the transition, and depending on the company, you might have an internal transition programs. So a lot of companies allow cross-functional people to apply for different jobs. So again, like a developer can apply to a product manager role, an analyst can apply to a product management role. So it happens in my company, for example. Here, I've seen it in many places in India as well. Um, but if not, then you can always apply outside. So you become a product analyst, maybe for a couple of years, learn the basics, and then you apply as a PM outside. That's what I did actually. So I was a program manager at a company before I joined my first APM role, and then I directly interviewed for APM role, uh, and then yeah, I was eventually able to get it. So that's an option. That's a pathway as well. Designer to PM, so those who are not from the coding background and maybe they are interested in designing, so user experience design, general wireframing, right? So you can potentially target a design role, which is, I mean, there are different titles for these now, right? So it's a product design, it's a UX design roles. Again, it's the same formula. You work with PMs, and then you learn the ropes and transition either internally or outside. Yeah. So typically, yeah, this is high level landscape, I guess. But I'm curious, yeah, if you have any questions, I guess, so I can maybe talk about more specifics. Yeah, back to you.
Uh, Hi Abhishek, this is Naresh from third year. Your Yes, the session is really insightful. Thanks for it. I have few queries. Like for us in NIT Trichy right now, we get a lot of product analyst roles. Companies like Sprinkler come to hire for us. So can you just give a small idea about what will be the pathway, career pathway if we choose product analyst role?
Sorry, can you say that again? Product what?
Product analyst.
Product
The
analyst.
one
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, you had just mentioned, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, like this is one of the standard pathway. So, and also, it could be good a way to enter product management if, let's say, you still haven't already have the understanding of different aspects. So, as a PM, uh, you can go in different directions of, uh, like I said, like product management role can vary, right? You can be a design PM, you can be a data PM. So starting as a product analyst gives you the time and the space to understand uh, which pathway you want to take, right? So a lot of this will depend on the company, right? So you mentioned Sprinkle, right? So
Yes, Sprinkler.
yeah, yeah. So the if you join as a product analyst, the what you will have to do is basically understand the development life cycle of the product in your company, right? So at what stage, as a like the PMs are starting their work, right? Or whether they're involved in the customer research or are they mostly involved in the development and delivery, right? And as an analyst, you will be basically supporting them with the insights and data, which is very, very crucial. So a product analyst is already a product manager in some ways, right? Because it's like a subset of the overall skills you need. So I think, yeah, it's a great way to start. I mean, you can always it, make a pitch to a PM couple of years in as a product analyst.
Okay, thank you.
Hi Abhishek, I'm at this side. I'm from second year. So what I wanted to like ask was, basically a company like Booking which has been around for a long time. Yeah, like how do you go about building a new product, a new feature or something like that? Because we can imagine a new company coming in. Okay, so they are seeing growth and everything, and apart from that, like from that they can like understand what they want to build. But for a company like Booking which has been around for a long time and mostly the same kind of things are there as in like hotels, like then travel and stuff. So how do you go about building a product? How do you like exactly understand like what is the process?
Yeah, good question actually. So the way it works is the two unique aspects, I guess, for product development and booking. One is ownership that the PM gets, and the framework for experimentation. So let's say as a PM, you have an idea that you want to probably improve the way currently travel is booked on the website. You can build an hypothesis. You can build an hypothesis. All you have to do is figure out a way to test it so it does not break things for the company, right? So let's say, so I work in booking. So let's say I want to probably include some sort of VR into how people look for hotels, right? I can still do it as long as I can test it without spending a lot of resources, as long as I can test it in a given framework, given time frame. So that's a culture we follow. We follow a strong culture of A/B testing. So PMs build hypotheses, make a plan, test it out. If it works, then you don't really need approvals, right? If it works, then it's already there.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Thanks.
Hello, sir. I'm Aditya, second year CSE. So I was wondering, you were talking about how once you enter a company, there's several different ways to transition into a PM role, for example, from a developer or from a product analyst. However, that is you trying out some other role, figuring out that PM is something that you want to do, and then transitioning into that role. So if I were to enter a company as a PM, for example, like sit for a PM interview and enter, I'm assuming that there's not much scope for transitioning career from a PM to those same roles, like a developer or a product analyst. So in
Um,
my second year right now, what would be some avenues to explore product management to figure out whether something I want to do?
um, I mean, so one way is like you probably can scout for internships, right, in product roles. I think so. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you can basically get project right, hands-on experience through internships in product or maybe as an analyst. Typically, big companies usually require some experience before they hire PMs. So that's why I mentioned these APM programs, right? They're specific to some companies. Uh, it's not that organized all across the board, right? So even in India, like in, let's say, in the startup scene, most PMs are either, let's say, have an MBA degree or have some experience, and then now in bits and parts you have APM roles. That's why I mentioned this idea of transition, right? You start with some role which aligns with product management, and then you jump in, and that's what I let's say I did. I don't know if that answers your question. You're saying how do you do reverse? Is that your question?
Yes, sir. It was basically right around now in my college life. How would I figure out whether PM is something for me? That was the gist of my question. Yeah.
I see. Okay, no. So one thing I guess you probably one potential way is you engage with some online communities, like let's say the product folks, and you can potentially try to do some hands-on case studies. So I believe, let's say if you take the example of the product folks, they have these tear downs, right? So you will not know if you have a knack for it unless you do something hands-on, right? For example, the core of product management is product thinking. Everything else you can learn. You can learn how to talk to a developer. You can learn how to launch a product, but you need to have a product thinking. Whether, let's say, looking at Zomato, can you analyze what the product is? Going through the app, do you know what it's doing, who the user is, what are they trying to do? That is the core of it, right? So I would say at this stage, if you're exploring whether it is for you or not, you um, pull up some case studies online, try your hands on it. There are communities where you can get feedback whether you got it or not, and then you see you have to you need to find it interesting after doing it for a couple of times. Then I think that's probably one of the effective ways.
Understood, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Uh, Abhishek, Rahul this side. Uh, can I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So Abhishek, this is Rahul this way, and I had one question. So I am an EC fourth year, and I would be joining my company pretty soon as a software developer. So is it possible to actually transition to a kind of product manager who specializes in data science from the software development role?
I believe so. So it depends what experience you get as a software developer. You mean the PM who are focused on data
What
science
kind of
products? Sorry, just so I get it right. So you're saying you want to transition from software development to product management, but specific to data science roles.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah. So, see, I mean, the nature of product management, like the core aspect, will not change. Whether it's a regular product, let's say, or a DS product, there are specific hard skills, right? So, how a data science product or how a machine learning product works, uh, there will be some difference, and you should probably look up for there are a bunch of material online about how to transition into, let's say, machine learning product management. Focusing on becoming a product manager, let's say, and some of the things I talked about, focus on those skills. Um, Specific areas will happen as soon as like you get the domain understanding, right? So you might want to become, let's say, a B2B product manager or a B2C. That will come from, that's just a domain switch. The core aspect will remain the same. So I'll say, yeah, get uh, uh, basically work with data. If you work with data science, you know how they are building the product.
Thank you. I was working with data science a lot, so that's why I asked.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it is, again, it
Thank
does
you,
not
Abhishek.
change very much. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. So I don't have an MBA degree, for example. So still working in product for 8 9 years now. But yes, I mean, it probably makes it easier sometimes. So you see, at least in, again, Indian tech scene, a lot of PMs are being hired from MBA right away. But I, like, in terms of what you do, it's the same whether you have an MBA or not. So if, like, so after MBA, getting into product management is getting more and more common, but I don't think it's really essential, right? Because, like I said, the core is product thinking. You will learn the business aspect. You learn everything on as you go. So, in terms of doing the job, in terms of being successful in the job, you don't need an MBA. At least that's my experience, right? But yeah, like, let's say, get it's probably just like one of the hacks, I guess. If somebody has an MBA, then it's just, yeah, you land a PM. It's much easier. But for you guys, let's say, I would say it's still possible. You might need to invest a couple of years into different roles, or maybe just learning to land that role. So that's probably the difference, um, rather than, let's say, getting a role right away.
Hi Abhishek, Amar again.
Yep.
So as we know, like how important like user interviews are for PMs. So like how do you exactly go about conducting user interviews, and how do you get insights from that? Like, is there a procedure you follow, or like how to like make the process more efficient?
Yeah. So I haven't, like, in my products, I have not really done a lot of qualitative research. It's mostly quantitative data analysis, to be honest.
Yeah,
The most qualitative research I've ever done is when I was working for those startups, like in India, in Bangalore.
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, there could be hacks, right? So, for example, depending on the budgets of the company, right, you might be able to hire a company who can set up interviews for you, right? And then, um, but typically, I guess it's a learning process, right? So you can follow some templates
yeah,
online, but I think it's always good if you follow your own gut into understanding the product, right? So if you have an app for the product, you talk to the customer, you ask based on what your understanding of the product is, right?
yeah,
If you follow somebody else's template, you might not, yeah, you might not get uh, the real answer sometimes, right? Because you have to drive it in your own way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I would say, and also in today, right, in today's time, you see the product grows so much in short span. In general, qualitative analysis is not enough. You cannot fully rely on, let's say, interview 10 interviews. So you always need to do some sort of secondary research to complement what you do. I would say qualitative research are useful just to get a basic understanding of what people are thinking. It's useful if it's a B2B product, like this, if it's like just if you're dealing with business clients. But for consumers, it's you have to connect the dots in multiple ways, I would say.
Yeah. And yeah, talking about B2B, like as in a SaaS or business like that. So like, how do you prioritize, features? As in like one of your like biggest customers is like, okay, I really need this feature in my product or something like that, and you have something else lined up. Like, how do you go about prioritizing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that's probably the core aspect of the role, that you have to really be good at prioritization. So in order, there are different frameworks, I guess, you will find online. The core is that you have to know your success metric first. You prioritize. You cannot prioritize if you don't have an end goal in mind and north star in mind. So let's say you're working for a B2B product and you want to, let's say, uh, improve retention. Let's say you have 100 customers, you want to retain all of them or retain 90 of them. That's your success metric. All your feature prioritization should be mapped to that. If it's not, then you're building something off, basically. That's and then you can break it down, right? So you have to have a north star for
Yeah.
prioritization. It can be impact, it can be money, revenue, it can be
Yeah.
more users. So on.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Jay.
Yeah. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Rahul speaking from third year. I also have a question. So how do we get small? You talked about product management, doing small projects, right, sir? How do we get that at least in a third year or second year, like during the summer break?
You mean like corporate internships or just like personal projects, like on your own?
Yeah, so both would work. Because obviously getting the first internship is tougher. So maybe we can start off with a couple of projects to build our portfolio, and then we apply to a company. I think it'll give us a higher chance as well.
Yeah, so this is good question, and this is I also get puzzled actually sometimes when people ask me this, because there are not a lot of internship opportunities straightforward. So you really have to hack it, like a product manager would do in the job. I would say one of the hack could be that you basically just pick any product that you like, um, start doing a product analysis on your own. Let's say build a 4 pager, 5 pager deck, and put it up on, let's say, on your personal website or some sort of portfolio, maybe on LinkedIn, right? And you do that, let's say, once a week, or then you have a portfolio there. So um, think of a product that is growing in the market you are in, let's say in India and Bangalore, wherever. Think of a product like, let's say, Cred, where there is a buzz around it. Can you look at that product and analyze and give some improvement ideas that probably are not already obvious to others? Could be a very good artifact for you for your next job interview or internship interview, right? Because that's nobody's stopping you to do that. You don't really need any access. You just look at the product, uh, and in fact, most of the PM interviews will be focused around this. At least for booking, let's say if you interview in booking, they will ask you three improvement ideas on the current product, and they won't give you any data. So you just look at the product, you go through the website, maybe make a transaction, and then as a product manager, you should be able to come up with loopholes, right? This is where it's breaking. Similar to, I think, the teardowns that TPF does. So I would say that's a hacky way. You do this for a bunch of products in different domains, build a portfolio. Um, there could also be some sample data which you can use, let's say, to do all this. But even without it, you can do like simple design. Um, yeah, I guess apart from that, I don't really know if there are any structured way. Second is networking, I would say. Let's say if you manage to make a group, either within, let's say, this group, if everyone is passionate about product management, you guys can do it as a group also, or through a community where you work on a um, same case study. uh, but you will get the experience of working as a team, right? Sounding each other's ideas. These should be useful because this could be should be part of your resume. This should uh, now, yeah, all these artifacts count now.
Got it, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more questions? You can put them in the chat box or just unmute and ask the guest. Okay, cool then. So we'll wrap up for today. So thanks
Yeah.
a lot for joining us today, sir. It's been a pleasure having you here. This has really been an eye opener to most of us regarding how we perceive this new domain which has been coming up, this product management. So thanks a lot for
Yeah.
joining with us.
Uh, uh, Actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Abhishek. Mohit here. I'm in my final year of chemical engineering. I have a question regarding AI product management. So, like how we go about building AI in a product, like implementing AI in a product. I'm facing difficulty in that. Like we have a product, and how can we incorporate AI in that? Assuming that I don't have any prior knowledge in AI, so do you have any suggestions about how can I go about it, and how can
Yeah,
I?
that's a good one actually, and I would actually encourage everyone to at least start understanding machine learning basics, because like I said, this is probably how the industry will transform, if not entirely, but in some parts. So exactly to your question. So in order to pursue AI either independently or as a feature in your product, you need to know the life cycle of a machine learning product first, right? How a ML model works. Similarly, as a software product manager, you need to know the software development life cycle. So first, you need to understand technically how an ML model is built, but you don't really need to get too technical, right? As a product manager, your role will be to define the features in a model, right? So I'll give you an example. So let's say Netflix, right? So the way Netflix gives recommendations, it's based on your data. They have a model which recommends some, let's say, new content to you. Now, as a PM, if you want to improve that product, you need to identify what other data type I can feed so that it can give better recommendation. So that feature requirement comes from product managers, right? So we call it a feature in a model that goes in. So I would say do some sort of machine learning 101 online. There are a lot of free courses. There is a website called deeplearning.ai. They have foundational AI courses. So you get a hang of it. And then again, I would say hands on, pick up a product, try to come up with new features for that. But yeah, basic technical ML 101 should help.
Uh, Thanks, Abhishek. Covers almost. Can you repeat that a deep learning AI something you recommended?
Yeah, let me bring you guys here maybe. Yeah, so you can copy it from
Yeah.
here.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, if you guys have more questions, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll just copy my link here. Just connect with me, and you can shoot more questions. I'm just happy to answer.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us today. So hope you also had a good session with us,
Yeah, it's
and we
fun.
all had a great time talking with you and interacting with you.
Yeah,
So
no, good luck, everyone. I mean, it's I can tell you from my experience, it's a fun role. It's a good ownership of if you become a PM. So if you really already feel that you want to be one, don't like just keep pursuing it. Even if this journey is not straightforward, right? You might take a couple of years before you land a job, but keep at it.
sure, sir, it's
Thanks.
been a very informative and interactive session with you. So I think that concludes our session for today. And kindly, everyone over here, if you're interested in the domain, please join up for our second talk tomorrow with Mr. Maleshri, who's an alumni from our very own college. And he also has worked within multiple companies in a PM role. And he'll be explaining more about the various roles of product manager. So it'll be 12 p.m. tomorrow in G Meet again. So until then, have a nice evening and thank you, everyone.